So, let's say you're sitting at home, and you're bored because, let's say it's 1977 and there's no such thing as the internet or smartphones. Looking for something to do to entertain yourself, you suddenly remember that heap of sand that's in the corner of your living room. I mean, everyone's got one of those. So you decide you're going to relocate the heap of sand to another part of the living room. Except, just to make it fun, you decide to move the heap one grain at a time. Why would you do such a thing? Well, kids, because the one thing they did have in the 70s were drugs. Really, really good drugs. So as you're moving the sand grain by grain, a thought occurs to you. At what point does the heap of sand not become a heap anymore? Obviously, if you move one grain, it's still a heap. Same thing with 2 or 3. But what about 100? 1,000? And once it's not a heap anymore, what exactly is it, besides a big mess on your floor that you're going to have to clean up later? The sororities paradox is all about the vagueness of language. Because the word heap doesn't have a specific quantity assigned to it, the nature of a heap is subjective. It also leads to false premises. For example, if you try the paradox in reverse, you start with a single grain of sand, which is not a heap. Then you could argue that 1 grain of sand plus another grain of sand is also not a heap. Then 2 grains of sand plus another grain of sand is also not a heap. This continues until the statement, a quadra-bajillion grains of sand is not a heap, which as we know does not make sense. Of course, moving a pile of sand from one part of the floor to another part doesn't make a lot of sense either. This experience teaches us 2 things. First, language can be subjective and may have a different meaning from person to person. And secondly, don't do drugs, kids, especially in the 70s. But what you should do is subscribe. The hangman's paradox. Let's say you're making a cross-country trip, and you get caught speeding in one of those small towns in the South. You go before a judge that has a reputation of being one of the toughest judges around, but you're not too worried. After all, you were just going 7 over the speed limit. How bad could the punishment be? And then the judge sentences you to death. Not only that, he's kind of about it. He tells you that the hanging will take place at noon on one weekday in the following week, but that the execution will be a surprise. You won't know the day of the hanging until the executioner knocks on the cell door at noon that day. The more you think about it, you realize 2 things. First, that's a terrible surprise. The second thing that occurs to you is they're not really going to hang you. You've thought about it logically, and here's why you came to that conclusion. You begin by concluding that the surprise hanging can't be on Friday, because if he hasn't hanged you by Thursday, there's only 1 day left, and so it won't be a surprise if you're hanged on Friday. You then reason that the surprise hanging can't be on Thursday either because Friday has already been eliminated. And if you haven't been hanged by Wednesday noon, the hanging must occur on Thursday, making a Thursday hanging not a surprise either. And with the same reasoning, you conclude that the hanging can't also occur on Wednesday, Tuesday, or Monday, and joyfully you retire to your cell, confident that the hanging will not occur at all. The next week, the executioner knocks on your door at noon on Wednesday, which, despite all of the above, was an utter surprise to you. Everything the judge said came true. Hopefully this taught you a couple things. First, no matter how smart you think you are, and I know you're smart because you're watching my videos, there's always something you didn't see coming. And the second takeaway, stay out of the South. If you absolutely have to drive through there, go the speed limit. The teleportation paradox. Speaking of Star Trek, let's talk about teleportation for a minute. We've all seen it. Maybe you're not old enough for Star Trek, but you've seen it used in Days of Future Past, or Rick and Morty. Go to the show, by the way. If anyone wants to talk Rick and Morty, join my Discord, link in description. But while you're sitting there, dipping your chicken nuggets in Szechuan sauce, did you ever think about what exactly happens when you teleport? 1 minute you're standing on the Enterprise and wondering why you chose to wear your red uniform shirt, and the next minute you're on a strange planet fighting a losing battle with a 6-headed space monster. But how did it happen? There was a version of you that disappeared, and then in the blink of an eye, you were completely rebuilt and appeared in a new location. But is the new version really you? After all, your old self was just completely destroyed and nothing was left. Is the new version the same, or like the sequel to hit movie Finding Nemo, known as Finding Dory, is the new version just not quite the same? And even if the new version is constructed the exact same way, is your soul really still intact? In other words, if it's even still you, is it really you? I mean, you're made up of all the same stuff, but you're not made up of the exact same stuff, if that makes any sense at all. The crocodile paradox. This one comes from the 16th century and actually helped shape the language. Imagine there's a mother who's out for a nice walk with her small child. All of a sudden, a crocodile appears and snatches the child. The woman, who's seeing her hopes of being named Renaissance Mother of the Year go up in smoke, pleads with the croc to return the child. In an unexpected not only understands her, It proposes a deal. He'll only return the child safely if the mother can correctly guess whether or not he will indeed return the boy. So if the mother guesses that the crocodile will return him, if she's right, he's returned. If she's wrong, the crocodile keeps him. Are you starting to see the problem here? I mean a problem other than the fact that she appears to be a really bad mom. But if she correctly guesses that the crocodile never intended to return the child, and that was indeed the croc's intention, then the crocodile has to return the child, but in doing so breaks his word and contradicts the mother's answer. On the other hand, if she is wrong, and the crocodile actually did intend to return the boy, the crocodile must then keep him even though he intended not to, thereby also breaking his word. This conundrum made such an impression on the people in the Middle Ages that they came up with the word croc-delight to describe a dilemma where you admit something that's later used against you. That's one big reason that, to this day, police still employ the tactic of good croc, bad croc when trying to get a confession out of a suspect. The hot dog paradox. Okay, being real, this one isn't so much of a paradox as it is a question you and your stoned buddies would ask each other in your dorm room at 3 a.m., right after you spent an hour debating which orange came first, the color or the fruit. The question is a hot dog a sandwich? Well, first of all, because I know there are some nitpickers out there, a hot dog is technically just a meat tube. The real question would be, is a hot dog on some sort of bread a sandwich? Notice no one ever asked the real question everyone wants to know, what the hell is actually in a hot dog? As far as the sandwich thing goes, it turns out there is an answer. According to the leading hot dog maker in the world, Oscar Mayer, and the Merriam-Webster dictionary, yeah, a hot dog's a sandwich. But is it really that simple? Surely no one could argue with those authorities, right? Well, say hello to the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council, which I swear to God is a real organization. Those killjoys over the NHDSC say definitively that a hot dog is not a sandwich. They issued a press release and everything, as well as having an entire page of their website devoted to explaining their position. They list 12 reasons to back up their stance, but we're not listening to them all over here. Get over here and read them if you want, but I figure most of you have watching videos on YouTube time, but not listening to 12 mostly dumb reasons why a hot dog is not a sandwich kind of time. Anyway, the experience machine. Here's a fun one. Let's say you could plug into a machine that would give you any experience you desired. Super-duper neuropsychologists could simulate your brain so that you would think and feel that you were writing a great novel, making a friend, or reading an interesting book. Think of it like entering the Matrix voluntarily. You're just floating in a tank with electrodes attached, but because you're pre-programmed, feels like you're out there racing at Daytona, climbing Mount Everest, or reading a great book with Sydney Sweeney. Because we live in a universe with no apparent purpose, and because our lives are often characterized by less than ideal conditions like working, suffering, and being a Jets fan, we have no good reason to not opt for something substantially better, even if it's artificial. But what about human dignity? What about satisfying our true desires? Do those things matter as much as fulfilling every desire you have? This question has been debated by philosophers for centuries, but in fairness, most of those debates happened before Sydney Sweeney was born. Just saying. The free will paradox. Let's talk about free will. We all have it, right? I mean, for the most part, like, if you've been married 30 years and it's Valentine's Day, you better be giving her some flowers. It's still your free will in play. After all, you chose to send her those flowers, just like you chose not to sleep on the couch for a week. But is free will really an illusion? The argument is there's no such thing as free will because every thought and every decision is influenced by some sort of environmental event. Don't believe me? Okay, try this. If free will is real and it's based on your thought process, tell me what your next thought will be. Are you thinking about how to prove free will is real? If you are, you're doing it in response to my question. Now, are you thinking about how you'd like to reach through your phone and rip my esophagus out? Well, that's just another example of, you know what? I think you get it. Let's move on. The card paradox. Here's one to try the next time you're at a party. If you never want to be invited to another party, take the index card and write, the statement on the other side of this card is true. We'll call that statement A. Turn the card over and the opposite side reads, the statement on the other side of this card is false. Trying to assign any truth to either statement A or B, however, leads to a paradox. If A is true, then B must be as well. But for B to be true, A must be false. And oppositely, if A is false, then B must be false too, which ultimately makes A true. Sit back and watch the fun as everyone at the party becomes increasingly annoyed, and pretty soon people start asking other questions, including, but not limited to, who invited this guy? And why did he bring an index card and not beer like a normal human being? Would it be morally correct to rip out his esophagus? All very valid questions. And here's my favorite paradox of all time. Unlike many others which have been around for centuries and have been pondered by some of the best minds around, this one was dreamed up in this century and has been pondered mainly on TikTok. This is the Rick Astley paradox. According to Rick's 1987 smash hit, Never Gonna Give You Up, he will never give you up, and he will never let you down. But let's say your dog just chewed up the DVD of your favorite movie, the 2009 Pixar classic Up. No problem, since your friend Rick Astley is also a huge Pixar fan, and you know for a fact he has a copy of the movie. But because he's Rick Astley, it's the director's cut with tons of deleted scenes, commentary from the cast, and all kinds of extras. That's when Rick tells you that he can't give you up. After all, it's right there in the title of the song. But because you had your heart set on watching your favorite movie, and because he won't part with his copy, he has indeed let you down. Rick is sad and struggles to process this information. His eye begins to twitch, his lips move but no words come out, until ultimately his head explodes and he collapses. Great paradox, right? The Foreigner paradox. This is a variation of the Ship of Theseus paradox where you gradually replace a ship's boards one by one, until eventually the ship has been completely rebuilt with all new boards. The question becomes, is it the same ship? But since nobody builds ships out of wood anymore, let's talk about classic rock bands, in particular the band Foreigner. They sold over 80,000 records in the 70s and 80s with hits like Cold as Ice and Waiting for a Girl Like You, but time is undefeated, and some members have gone through that big jukebox in the sky, while others decided that 50 years on the road is enough. Here's the paradox. Mick Jones was the last original member, and he stopped touring in 2023, but Foreigner still tours, and they'll be at it again this year. So what band are we seeing? With no original members remaining, aren't we really just seeing a Foreigner cover band with great marketing? So you're Achilles, the greatest runner in Greece. You're jacked, you have a bad heel problem, but let's set that aside for now. As one does, it appears you've decided to raise a tortoise. Yeah, you're going up against a turtle. What's that? Turtles aren't the same as tortoises, you say? Guess we don't need this guy anymore. Look what you've done. So you challenge this turtle because you enjoy winning and like the simple victories. But here's the fun part. You let the tortoise have a small head start, just to make it more exciting. Well, plot twist, this dude named Zeno is convinced that this race will go on forever. Yep, okay, here's how it goes. Once the race starts, each time Achilles gets to where the tortoise was, the tortoise is moved just a little bit ahead. When Achilles arrives at that new place, the tortoise has already moved forwards again. The gap is getting smaller and smaller, but Zeno says it'll never actually reach zero, meaning Achilles is destined to always chase the tortoise but will never be able to catch him. In reality, that would make no sense. Achilles would easily overtake the tortoise in like 2 seconds. But in the slightly cooler Zeno's paradox, Achilles finds himself stuck in a never-ending cycle of fractions. I hopefully don't need to explain to you that realistically you can travel distances, but at the same time, can you think of an explanation for why the paradox doesn't affect us? The paradox of omnipotence. You're a powerful, wise being and everything's going well. You can create worlds, split oceans, and still find time for a heavenly rest. One day, in Philosophy 101, someone asks, "Hey, Almighty One, can you make a rock so heavy that even you can't lift it?" Yikes. Out of nowhere, you, the most powerful being in the universe, find yourself trapped in a never-ending logic loop. If you create the rock, you won't be able to lift it, which shows there's something beyond your reach. But if you really can't make it, then there's something you won't be able to do. Nobody's gonna win. So option 1, you make the rock and struggle to lift it. Let's say you move forward to make that happen. The perfect stone. It's so heavy and big that not even your incredible endless strength can lift it up. The rock is the winner, meaning there's something you couldn't do. Lift it up. Your all-powerful credit card? Cancelled. Your resume? Gotta update it. Get back home LinkedIn. Option 2 is you can't make the rock. Okay. So maybe you see that the first choice is a trick and you think, I'll find a clever way to answer this question. I just won't make the rock. Awesome, isn't it? Wrong. If you can't manage to move this rock, then there's something you're unable to do. You're supposed to be all-powerful, so where's all the power? Or you just make it and lift it as well. But that would again be a task you couldn't fulfill. It's just an endless loop and a very confusing one. Anyway, if you made it to the end, subscribe and click this video over here for more.